We're having back to our program. We are having back to Connected Farmer Jerry Gidel and Jack Scoville. Jerry Gidel is from Midland Research, and Jack Scoville is from the Price Futures Group from Chicago, Illinois. They're going to speak about new projections after the Pro Farmer Tour and the Derecho wins. We are starting with Jerry. Jerry, how are you today?
Very good, Luis.
So what are your comments after the Pro Farmer Tour?
Well, we're really finishing up right now. We've went through 5 of the 7 states and I think it's really given us a real insight here as to what we might see from their final numbers and what that might impact us going forward into the September USDA's report from there. Because the fact that what we mentioned in our previous kind of conversation about this year's crop after we went down to Central Illinois is that we did not feel as good about this year's ear count out there, and the fact that it wasn't even actually as good as last year, which last year wasn't very good in comparison to 2 years ago. And that's exactly what was found here in the latest Pro Farmer data that's come through here. Illinois 2 years ago on the Pro Farmer Tour was 105.5 ears per acre in the measurement world, and that compares to this year's basically 100. So it's basically 5.5 ears less. Well, that's really tough if you're going to try to outdo 2 years ago's 210 bushel yield. The USDA actually is looking at a 207 bushel yield already. So I don't know. That's our problem that we've early discovered, and actually have started looking at some of the data here on these tables that might be showing up on our screen here eventually, and that will be a fact where all the states here, Illinois is important, of course, on the ear count along the way, but even they started out in Ohio and Indiana, both those states were 3 and 4 bushels, 3 or 4, 8 years. I don't want to say bushels because the ears and bushels are comparable, but even Nebraska wasn't as bad as some of the other states that we've seen so far. It was only down 1.5, but that's a state that has 60% of its corn is irrigated, so it doesn't have as much variation maybe as some of these other states, particularly from the dryness that we've started developing in the Western Corn Belt. We'll talk about that a little bit later. From there, so this whole scenario with the USDA projecting a number here of 181.8 million bushels on a yield versus a 176. That's a pretty aggressive number out there. It just continues to be a little hard to come up with on that. The other big feature, of course, is how much damage might have happened across Iowa. We're looking at satellite maps. We're trying to calculate what percentage of the crop might be 0, what might be 50%, what might have limited damage, and that's always an educated guess at this point. I think, though, that definitely Iowa's yields have been impacted. I've seen numbers from 150 to 500 million bushels. I don't think 500 is right on target. I think it's somewhere, my personal guess is in the 250 to maybe 350 number. That depends on how we get a better handle on that. And I think we'll get more data and more ideas in the finalized part of this Pro Farmer Tour. The information we have so far is really Western Iowa, where they really were surprised by how extensive that dryness was. North of I-80 and east of I-35. That's actually my home country. I grew up in that part of the world out there in Iowa. I haven't lived there in many years, but I definitely know the world. And it's been a tradition of that part of Iowa of getting dry spells over the years, and they definitely have one this year. And it's been going on more than 6 weeks, in some cases 8 weeks out there, and that starts to really have an impact. Now, it didn't show up big time in all 3 districts, only in the West Central one that they were 8 or 10 bushels lower on their pro farmer data and that, but everybody was just shocked that it was so dry out there. But as always, the market analysis sometimes comes from the East Coast all the way to Chicago, and then it gets lost when it goes across the Mississippi River. They don't seem to get as connected to what happens out there and keep track of it as much. And also the crop conditions reports have continued to kind of not show the difficulties that have been going on out there. And the biggest problem in that happens to be the fact that when you drive by it from the field, or from the road looking at the field, you don't see dryness. You don't see the crack in the ground. You might see the dryness in the ditch because the grass is brown, but that's about it as I see it. So it's going to be interesting as to how they come up with the final numbers in that. But I would definitely say that the USDA's 181.8 is not a number that's likely to go higher. And maybe I'd say we'd be 2 to 3 bushels off of that number. Does that mean that we're running out of corn? No. Will the number coming from our friends at Pro Farmer, how that's going to compare? I would sense that they're going to have to blend together both the issues of Iowa and then the dryness, and then also I think they're going to note the fact that that their numbers just aren't really matching up as strongly as the USDA's numbers are when you start looking at their history of relationships.
Okay, let's put Jack on board right now. Jack, do you see Iowa as the core of the new yield reduction?
Well, in the case of corn, definitely there's a reduction in Iowa, no doubt about it. I think really, even though the Derecho windstorm has been getting all the headlines, it's been the dry weather that really seems to have impacted the corn crop more than the Derecho did. And I think we could easily be 2-3 bushels or less in the state of Iowa. So yeah, I do think that Iowa is the downfall of the corn crop this year. Nebraska has also been dry, but a lot of that crop is irrigated. So that's why you see some better numbers there. Once you get into Illinois, even though we are on the dry side, the Pro Farmer Tour did find some really good results for Illinois, and even for Indiana, and even Ohio was kind of mixed. And I say really good results, but once again, with lower plant populations, the overall yield calculations have come in less than USDA last month. And so we're looking at a yield reduction. And we were looking at a yield reduction probably even without the dry weather in Iowa and the Derecho coming across Iowa, a little bit of northern Illinois here. So the USDA just went too high, just assumed a fabulous plant population, which it's turning out is just really not there. Over to the beans. The beans are looking better, but once again, there's some issues with the pod counts, issues with plants per acre and things like that. When you look at the table that Jerry put together for everybody here, the bean counts are the pod counts are coming in significantly less than 2018, and that's without Iowa included. Minnesota pod counts are probably going to be pretty high, but once and maybe even be the exception to the rule of lower pod counts this year. And South Dakota came in with higher pod counts as well. But every other state, Ohio, Indiana, Nebraska, Illinois, came in with lower pod counts, and that points to lower production as well. So the fact of the matter is that USDA is probably going to end up being way too high on their soybeans production as well. It's a good crop out there, but it's just not the bin buster that people were expecting earlier this summer. And the USDA seems to have forecast in their August production updates.
It seems that the overall crop would be reduced significantly.
Well, yeah, it's going to be reduced. I don't know that it's going to be reduced to make a significant difference in ending stocks projections or anything like that. But there's no doubt about it that the crop estimates have been very, very high going into now, as a matter of fact, and now with the dryness in Iowa. And actually in many other parts of the Midwest, but especially in Iowa, the Derecho winds in Iowa, a little bit of northern Illinois, they're going to be reduced even more. But it's really been a populations issue that we've discovered that's going to keep the overall yield down, and how much do you subtract from that because of the dryness and the Derecho winds becomes a different issue altogether.
Okay. Jerry, I just discussed with Mike Zuzolo about 30 minutes ago about very strong forward sales this season. So, in your opinion, why is that happening?
You talking about the U.S. farmers, or you talking about the Brazilian farmers? I know the Brazilian and South American this year and next year type stuff. I'd have to say that from a understanding of new crop sales out there, there really hasn't been a super attractive price since even the first of this year in the Western Corn Belt. From there, the basis levels they were offering and things like that, even if we had higher futures prices, the basis was not as it is now. So it's actually some of the cash offerings right now are starting to be a little attractive for getting some stuff done. But even then, that's one of the few things that's got people freaked out about the bends that got lost in this whole thing and this derecho, that the on-farm storage is not going to be there, and there's not any way of getting it redone before the harvest. So, and even the commercial storage is another thing out there that's been damaged. So there's fears that this level and the relationship of cash to futures not going to gain better and could get worse in that situation. From there, from the standpoint of cash sales, but soybeans probably are better. We've had a great amount of international enthusiasm led by China. It looks like we were concerned all year through 6-8 weeks ago that they hadn't bought anything, and now we've actually have on the new crop wise the highest number of beans we've sold ever going into harvest, and the corn we're right up there with like 25 years ago. Those two things are positive about overseas demand, but we need to keep going. We got a lot more stuff we could sell to all these people, the Mexicans, Europe, Asia, and of course China. We've got plenty of stuff to sell here, even if we do have a little smaller crop from what Jack and I are seeing.
Yes, in the case of Brazil, of course, was a record of forward sales, and in Argentina is also strong, and there are some forward sales in the U.S. as well. Hey, Jack, how do you analyze this situation?
I think the demand for U.S. soybeans and for U.S. corn has been excellent. It's been China-led, as Jerry pointed out, and this is their way of fulfilling the phase one of the trade agreement. They're buying a lot of new crop beans, a lot of new crop corn, because they need them. There's been some pretty severe flooding, especially in the southern parts of China, central and southern parts of China, and it's hurt their production potential pretty greatly. So they're taking exactly what they need right now, especially in the corn market. I think we'll see these overall sales continue to hold fairly strong. China is going to fulfill or come as close as they can to fulfilling the phase 1 of the trade agreement. And that means a lot more new crop sales on the books. But we do have the corn, we do have the beans to sell. I think overall we're going to end up with a decent production here in the U.S. and plenty of beans, plenty of corn to sell. We're going to have strong competition coming from South America, first for corn, second for soybeans, and we'll see our sales drop off pretty rapidly here after the first part, once the South Americans start to harvest.
What's your estimate for stocks?
Well, right now you have to figure that given the amount of loss that we've seen in the corn and just using the previous USDA numbers, you're looking at something around 2.4 billion bushels, maybe a little bit less for corn. For beans, it's a little tougher to get a handle on because I'm not sure exactly what the damages are there. But I can easily figure that 50 million less, maybe 100 million less of soybeans being available. So still some ample supplies available to the market.
Jerry, your final point, please.
Well, yeah, Jack's kind of hit the good general numbers there for the S&Ds. The one thing that interesting this year is going to be is that things look so rosy 4th of July, even up through the latter part of July, and basically the finish on this crop is going to not be as strong as the people thought it was going to be, and that's the major difference here. And that's, as he says, that's difficult to judge on soybeans because the difference between a very big plump seed and a normal seed or less seed is huge in the number of bushels you get off a field. The pods can be there. They might shrink up. They might be aborted. They might be small. Man, we drive around, both of us said it looked like the one of the best looking crops. And I think that's the problem. Everybody's looking at a good looking crop. What is it going to actually be when you get to the bend? Oh, that's $1 million question that we all love to be able to answer. Sometimes it's not easy to do that, trying to even look at it from a tour standpoint or even trying to count things as Pro Farmer does on their 3x3 foot plot from there. So, but in the same situation here, I think that the big thing on this thing is that we've going to have a sizable crop, and we need to take advantage of any of these aberrations that come along here on prices. Once we get above 350 and these corn up to 380, that's going to be tough sledding above there. $4 is going to be at least at this point, unless we have some problems in Brazilian corn production, it's not going to be easy once we get above. Soybeans, we're above $9 now. I guess $10 is the next magic number, and anything in that higher side of 950 to 975. Probably is places producers need to keep moving them here and then around the world because we've got plenty of supplies, it seems like, on a long-term basis.
Jack, your conclusions? Well, I basically agree with Jerry that we really don't know exactly how the soybeans are going to turn out, but it's going to be a decent crop, and I do think the producers got to be keeping a very close tab on the futures market right now here in the United States for sales opportunities. Market did start to fade back a little bit today. Corn held a little better than the beans did. I think that's because of the relative health of the corn crop in Iowa compared to the bean crop in Iowa right now. I think both these markets are probably going to fade back a little bit. It's just the wrong time of year to get real bowled up about futures. We're getting close to harvest after all, and that's when we usually make harvest lows. So I think we're probably going to fade from here a little bit. What happens after that will be a function of demand. If the demand does hold strong here for U.S. products, then we can see a rather significant rally develop after that. if the demand tails off, we could be more of a sideways market to maybe a little bit firmer type of tone as we move into the future.
We'll follow that closely indeed. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
Hey, happy to do it.